Well, if you've been following the channel, you'll know that I am a fan of the Fire Pro Wrestling series, and I picked up Fire Pro Wrestling World when it was in early access, streamed it a bit here on the channel, did a first impressions video, and I was overall, I would say, pretty impressed with the product at that point. But I had some nitpicks playing it along the way, and I more or less put it down. I figured, you know what, let me give the game a year or so to mature, and I'll come back and when it's ready and when all the players have modded it and when there's a really experienced creator wrestler scene, I'll come back and give it a shot. And the assumption was, at that point, it would be the game that I had always dreamed of. Well, unfortunately, that is not the case. I started playing it fairly recently, again after a year of inactivity, and I have to say the game has gotten worse. So a few reasons why. Number one, they still haven't addressed what I would call quality of life issues, things that should have been in the game, when it was officially released, but yet aren't there. And I think the first and most apparent one is the menu system is cumbersome. They did change the deal where it defaults to the CPU when you start a single-player game. But aside from that, it is still clunky. It is just something out of the late 90s, early 2000s, and it was bad back then if you played Fire Pro Wrestling Returns, even back into the Dreamcast and PlayStation versions. And you would think that after a year in development, with, I guess, supposedly regular updates, that they would have fixed that, but apparently they have not. Other little quality of life issues, they added the ability to put your own ring music in. Ring entrance music and just game music, but it's very hard to do. I mean, you have to assign, you have to basically put them all in the same BGM folder and then assign the entrance music as a skill per wrestler. It would be cool if somehow you could just download the wrestler with the music. I understand, probably why they wouldn't want to do that. And honestly, I don't necessarily need the entrance music. If it was just a matter of seeing files for all of your created wrestlers and dragging the music into a file, that would be one thing. But to kind of do a multi-click process with a mod for 700 wrestlers is not something that I want to do. However, it is pretty cool to have your own in-game music, and that's very easy to do. That's a drag-and-drop process. However, there's no randomization option. So if you have, 50 tracks, and I put some retro gaming tracks, thought it'd be pretty good, you still have to kind of scroll through them before each match, which is a pain in the neck. And ultimately, they have failed to give you a way to book multiple matches. Now, I understand they're coming out with a promoter mode, which will be kind of, supposedly some kind of run your own promotion and build it from the ground up and compete with other promotions. Now, that sounds like fun, but the game at release, and certainly within the first year, should have given you a way to just book your own card. Just to throw 6 matches together and play them through. Every time you want to play this game, you've got to be bumped out to the wrestler select menu, and if you want to change the stipulations and things like that, it is a multi-click process to get into one match, and it's quite frankly a waste of time. Another thing that they could do, speaking of randomization, is how about if you had a 6-match card mode, just to click randomize, and you just get, you've got a roster of 700-800 guys, and they would just throw 6 matches together that you could play through. Again, it would be a way to quickly and easily get into the meat and potatoes of this game. Another glaring problem that should have been fixed in this release is the round robin and elimination tournament mode let us play each match. This is a dream roster. It is the wrestling game we have always wanted. And you never had that ability in Fire Pro Wrestling to play every match in a tournament. And you would think, well, that is something easily addressed, and it's still not there. And that would give you the ability to book a card and play through multiple matches and create your own stipulations. It's so easy. It would make the game so much more enjoyable, and yet it's not there. Now, another issue that I've noticed coming back after a year was something about the game felt off. Something about the timing, something about the controls just felt a little off to me. It's hard to explain. I couldn't time my grapples as I normally would. And basically what I would do is I'd play on difficulty 4 or 5, speed 125. And I could do reasonably well. And for me, that was the sweet spot between kind of casual gaming, where, I could just sit down and relax with the game, but also have competitive matches. And I could not do anything. It was almost as if my controller was not registering any of my inputs. And this was really weird. And I was like, well, boy, I've been away from the series so long. Maybe I've gotten rusty. Maybe I've gotten older and I just can't do this anymore, which was very depressing until I went back and I put in some 6-man scramble on the Saturn, Fire Pro Wrestling Returns, and picked it up and was right back, to my usual self. And so when I came on here, I said, with my first impressions, I was reading that a lot of the old school fans were saying, that something's a little bit off with the timing, but it's manageable. Well, to me, they've changed the timing in some form or fashion. Now, if I knock down the speed and knock down the difficulty, I can kind of get back to having competitive matches. But I couldn't explain why this was. So I was looking around online. I was on the forums. One person said to me, they changed the timing significantly to make it easier for entry-level players. Now, I don't exactly know how this is easier. To me, it's much harder. Maybe that's one explanation. Another person said that if you don't have the DLC, you're missing some moves, so it could be that whatever is in a move slot for a particular button combination might not be working. And that's another one of my problems with this game. The New Japan DLC was not all that interesting to me in the sense that, well, I had a lot of the community-created New Japan wrestlers, and I had no particular interest in playing through the story mode. That's not why I have this game. But supposedly, your created wrestlers will not work with the new DLC. Now, I've read 2 things about it. One, if you download the DLC and your wrestler that you downloaded wasn't made with it, then you could run into some compatibility issues. Or if you download a wrestler who was created with some of the new moves in the new DLC, then that wrestler will be locked or not be functional. So, none of my wrestlers are locked. I have 770 wrestlers in the game. I haven't tested them all, but like I said, certainly jumping back in, I just felt like I was missing some moves. And the broader point, however, is that why lock the game behind the DLC? The pleasure of Fire Pro is that you can have this incredible roster and you can play all of these matches. And, locking moves and essentially wrestler abilities behind a paywall, makes the DLC mandatory. And I said in my initial impressions, boy, I hope the game figures out a fair way to monetize itself. And I would not call this fair and respectful of the community. So when you add all of those things together, the lack of core improvements that should have been there from the beginning, the tweaks to the timing, the DLC affecting the base game and locking out moves, this is not what I had hoped for from Spike Chunsoft. I just think there's probably other ways to monetize this game. I have no problems with the $3 DLC wrestlers, like for the Takayama Charity Wrestler. You could have created new stadiums. You could have created pre-made ring sets, at least for New Japan. You could, I don't know, release a standalone creation tool that makes managing the game a little bit easier. But to lock away core functionality, and if you have to pay, I don't know what the Fire Promoter cost is going to be. The first DLC was $20, so now if you have to pay $40, let's say, for both DLC packs to, quote, have the full game, and especially if the Fire Promoter mode gives you basic access to things like putting together a card, then that, I think, is just an unfortunate cash grab from a developer that can do better. I hope I'm wrong about that. I hope that the base game, evolves and adds at least these quality of life things in, because at its core, this is one of the games that I could play probably for the rest of my life. It's, with all the modding and all of the different things that you could do with this game, with all the creative potential in the package, it's just something that you could play for a long time. But I think the developers have really hindered the game from being all that it could be. And again, I hope that changes, or I hope they just bow out and the mod scene, once the game stops being updated, the mod scene makes the ultimate wrestling game that we've all wanted. But for right now, I have to say, very let down by the game, and I can't see myself picking it up and playing it until these core issues are corrected.